Hello, everybody. This is Beth Jordan from Authors Chat and More. And I want to welcome my new author, Matthew Bird. Hello, Matthew. How are you today?
I'm fabulous. Thank you, Beth. Thanks for inviting me today.
My pleasure. And of course, Matthew, as many of you know, lives in Thailand. So we've got this time difference. And I hope that all of you will be able to catch up with Matthew, but it doesn't matter because we are recording this and it'll be on my YouTube channel after this recording. But first of all, Matthew, really thank you for coming on this. You and I have spent many hours chatting about books and about some of the things that you have done after you've written the book, which we all want to hear about, because it's been a very exciting time for you. Before we begin, I'd like to play a short audio of Matthew's introduction, the prologue to his story, which I absolutely do love. So just bear with me, please, while I get this recording up. And here we go.
With emerald eyes, jet black.
Sorry about that.
Weathersby Thacker ventured into the jungle with Mayla, a young Candian woman he met a week earlier on New Year's Day, 1631. He thought she promised him a night of passion and a prize beyond his wildest imagination. She spoke in her native tongue and shy English too. That was enough to draw him to her, along with emerald eyes, jet black shiny long hair, and soft glowing sun-kissed skin. She showed him her intentions with her body and drew shapes in the dirt of a king, the sun and the moon, chattering in a language he failed to understand but longed to hear and know more. He could barely contain his hands and did not want to stop looking into her stunning eyes. They set off by mid-afternoon from Cali in a wooden cart pulled by a water buffalo. They slowly made their way down dusty and rutted paths among dense avenues of mango trees. The bone-shaking ride from the southern town took them 6 hours or thereabouts. That night, a three-quarter moon glowed, and a sky full of bright stars lit their way. Eventually, they reached a small remote grotto, lit from the outside by simple flickering flames. Mei Long startled Weathersby by jumping from the wagon before it came to a halt. "Come," she teased, running. "Let go before someone sees." Once they made their way inside, dozens of tiny lanterns smoked, and a robust fragrance of burning coconut oil settled all around. Within an inner recess was a compact sanctuary. An unnatural soft lime glow drew them deeper. The light became intense as Mei Long and Weathersby shielded their eyes, bowed their heads for the lowering roof, then shuffled on dusty knees. It was uncomfortable for him. He disliked the closeness of the walls and the lack of clean air. After 50 yards or so, the vault opened, and the glimmering shifted to a golden hue. The inner cavern felt cold and smelt musty. It was full of razor-sharp needles of rock hanging from above. To one side, a small lagoon emitted a beam from below its surface. Without hesitation, Mei Long unraveled her sarong and dived in. Weathersby, initially shocked by her lack of modesty, quickly followed her lead. The water was crisp, refreshing, and incredibly soft. It ran off their skin. Not a drop would stick. They could not stand upright in its center, although a shelf below the edge brought some relief. Lying on their backs, they viewed the ceiling. Its color slowly alternated in power, but there were no candles nor other distinct sources to identify the eerie lights. They lay there for many minutes, mesmerized by the cave's features. Placing a finger firmly on Weathersby's open mouth, Mei Long whispered, "No talk."
So that is some introduction. And I have to tell you, when I read that, I was going to read the story to my grandsons because, it sounds like pirates and treasure, perfect story for young children. So when I read that first part, I thought, oops, maybe not. However, I will read it to them again, and I might actually skip that bit and carry on with the rest of the story, because the rest of the story really, I think, is a story that many age groups are going to love and have loved. So I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Matt. I'm talking a little bit too much, but let me just, I actually did read your story, and I remember I got to the point where I couldn't put it down. I sat on the window ledge in my sun lounge, and I sat there until I finished reading it, because I personally love your genre. So let's hear about Matthew Bird. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Matthew Bird, where you live, where you come from, and whatever it is you want us to know, the listener to know.
Sure. Well, I'm an expat, so I live in Thailand. I moved out here. This is now my 5th year. The reason why I'm here is I'm married to Pat, who's Thai, and we have a daughter, Melissa, who was born in England, but she's now over here too. So I just decided I'd had enough of corporate life, 26 and a half years with the same company, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But it got to the point where I sort of, I was getting a bit older and maybe a bit long in the tooth, and just decided I wanted something different. And a whole load of personal circumstances came together, some good, some not so good, but in the end, I just decided I wanted a different life. And I'd known Pat for a very long time. We'd had a long distance relationship. So we decided before Brexit, we sort of made the decision that we wanted to come over here and live here permanently. And a couple of things got in the way, a little bit of ill health. But in the end, we're here and we love it. We sold up our house. We've got a lovely house here now that we built on what was farmland with a cowshed on. And it's now home, and we love it. So Thailand is now home, but I was born in Fife in Scotland, but bred mostly in Suffolk. So part of the linkage with the book is that the book almost starts in Suffolk, and the family is really important to me. So what I tried to do is I tried to incorporate some family ties in with the book. Not easy to do that, but I'll get into a little bit of detail on that later. So born and bred Suffolk, really, although born in Scotland, and now here in Thailand and loving it.
Yeah. And of course, I personally like that part of the world, having traveled to China for many, many years. I love pirate stories or stories based around pirates. And would you say that your story is historical fiction? What genre would you put it into, if there was one for your story?
Yeah, definitely historical fiction, but it's adventure fiction as well. So it crosses a couple of genres, but it's set in the late 17th century.
Yes.
I thought long and when I was thinking about what am I going to write about, because I had no idea. I mean, I'll be very honest with you. I started with a completely blank sheet of paper. Right? So the idea of writing a book came from Michael Happel and the Write That Book group, and I was one of the first members of that. But I literally started with nothing. I had an idea. Wouldn't it be nice? I'm retired. I live in Thailand. I've got plenty of time on my hands. Wouldn't it be lovely if I could become a writer and be successful and sell thousands of books and make lots of money? No, that wasn't really the idea. The idea was, can I really write? Yeah, because I've always had a problem with English. I had a nightmare at school. I had a teacher that put me down all the time and really put me off. And I'm a mathematician and statistician, so English has always been something I've struggled with. So part of the desire to want to write was to prove to myself that actually I can write, and I think I can tell a good story. Yeah. But I've never tried before, so this was all new. So 3 years or so ago, when writing started, it was literally, where do I start? And a long story short, I was having dinner, listening to Michael about starting up Write That Book, and what are you passionate about? What are you passionate about? My passions is travel and family. So and then we're having dinner, and this massive, I can't show you on the screen, this massive fruit called jackfruit, which was, I don't know how many kilos it was, but it was hard to lift up. It must have been 20 kilos, this fruit. Came from next door's tree, and we had it for tea, and it's delicious. And the fruit,
the whole jackfruit.
Whole jackfruit, and it's quite an event. Yeah, it's quite a celebration to open a jackfruit, because it takes a long time to grow, and it's a big thing. And you got this beautiful, sweet fruit that tastes, I think it tastes like a cross between a mango, a pineapple, and a banana. Yeah. Another analogy, if you remember your childhood and Wrigley's juicy fruit chewing gum,
Yes.
it tastes and smells like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you got this massive fruit. Okay, so I'm thinking, what am I going to write about? Because I was having dinner, enjoying the dinner, but what am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? And on my wall in the house is this huge print of a 16th century map.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love treasure hunts, treasure hunting stories. And I just started to make a few very random connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It started, okay, it's a treasure hunt. Yeah, I got this big fruit in front of me. Why don't I call the treasure a jackfruit? Because it's I can describe it. It makes it interesting, and that's how it grew from there.
Yeah.
So the blank sheet of paper I started to fill in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how it started.
Yeah. So
and I wanted to write historical so I could use my imagination. I didn't want to be too formal about it. I wanted to explore and see how I could go with it.
Yeah.
So that's how it started.
Yeah, but that's really worth your while having mentioned how you start, because when I'm doing book readings now, I do get asked, how do you start to write your story? And it's connections. It's like almost like joining up all the dots of random dots. And suddenly these random dots become actual threads. And these threads actually become lines to where your story is going to go. So yeah, I didn't know that about how you started your story. So I'm really glad to know about this. Yeah, that's wonderful. But you know, when I read the book, it's not just
it was a little bit random.
Yeah.
It was a little bit random. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a set agenda. I sort of knew what I wanted to write about. I wanted it to be related to places that I visited too. So I've travelled fairly extensively. I've been very fortunate. I've travelled around the world a couple of times. So I wanted it to be based on where I've been, but I also didn't want it to be too familiar and so people could guess too much about it. So everyone thinks, oh, it's about Thailand. Well, actually, Thailand's part of it.
Yeah.
But it's a very small part of it. Yeah. I wanted it to be more than just about Thailand as well.
Yeah.
So
in fact,
actually, Thailand's got a impact.
Yeah. In fact, when I read the story, I was going to ask you the question: did you have to do a lot of research, because there are a lot of dates, there are a lot of events that take place, there's a lot of detailed description of the type of ships, the way people live their lives, the characterization, the culture. So did you have to do a lot of research around your story?
Yeah, I did. And the Google is a wonderful tool.
Yes.
It really is. And it's not about cheating. It's about learning. And as an author, you tend to dive in and go down a bit of a tunnel, a bit of a tangent. You go through. I went down lots of tangents, and I did a lot of research. So Google was one part. Wikipedia, I use lots of that. I've got a pile of books. I bought some books as well on the history of Southeast Asia. Yeah. Just some of it I knew, but a lot of it I didn't. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time trying to make the story believable. I tried to make some connections with real events that happened at that time. Yeah. But I didn't overplay it, because I didn't want it to be too much like a textbook. I didn't want it to be a history book. I wanted it to be a book of fiction. It's all through my imagination. Yeah. But there are some key historical events and people that are highlighted in the book that were around at that point. I've obviously elaborated, but of course. They weren't obviously, they never found any jackfruit treasure, but I tried to make the connection to make it believable, otherwise, and make it historically accurate. Yeah. To do that, you need to do a lot of research. Yeah. And in fact, a couple of questions I wanted to ask you was, one of them is, were there any challenges in the genre that our listeners could learn from you in writing this type of genre? If you gave me just a one point or one thing that really found challenging, or maybe nothing. Yeah. Well, I think it is about. I think it because you're using your imagination. Yeah. It's about making actually some very small details very accurate. You can make it very accurate because you can get good. So I did a lot of research about ships in the 17th century, and I learned loads about seafaring that I never knew. So I went into a lot of detail, spent a lot of time, and found some really really good nuggets of information, like detailed information.
Yeah.
And then cross-checked it to make sure it was real, because sometimes stuff you find on the net is not quite so believable.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time on some very small details, but getting them absolutely right. So the ships, and there's quite a lot of ships mentioned in the book. I can't count with how many boats are in there, but there's a lot. And I've tried to make sure that the descriptions of the ships and the boats are genuine.
Yes.
So so you can spend hours on a paragraph.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's fine. But those hours from that one paragraph also stimulates other ideas you can use elsewhere in the book. So don't worry about, so my advice would be, don't worry about how much time you're spending on research, as long as you can use that time elsewhere too. So in other words, you try to be as efficient as you can. Otherwise you could just take, it took me a year and a half to write the book anyway, but I could have doubled that quite easily.
Yes.
Because you get excited by the detail. I do. The historical detail. And if you're not careful, you can go too far with it. And the trick is when to stop.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think it's important, because when I was reading the book, I was totally immersed in that detail and the ships, and I could actually find myself on the creaking ships across the waves. And I think that's what drew me to your historical fiction genre. And I have read quite a few. I won't mention any other authors I read, but I've always loved that, because I too have traveled, and I wish I had lived in a different century to the one I live in now. For me, adventure is not the sort of thing that I do. Adventure is like the story that you said. So I wanted to say, set in the 17th century, pirates and treasures and lust and greed and romance, and all the ingredients of a great swashbuckling adventure. Just give us a little hint of what the story is, so that the reader potential will get some idea. So they're going to rush up and buy your book. Tell us a little.
Sure. So it's a family story of 3 brothers and their cousin. Yeah. So the cousin is Riley Edwards, who's the lead character, and then you got Weathersby Thacker, James Thacker, and he's another brother as well. And they're basically they split up into twos. Yes. Yeah. And their grandfather, who obviously shared the same grandfather, same family, found this treasure many moons ago, brought some of it home, but also left a load of clues and left potentially some of the treasure elsewhere in his journey that he took. So when he passed away, he gave the boys some clues, and also that Riley, the lead character, had also been spending a lot of time with his grandfather when he was younger. And obviously, his grandfather was prepping him a little bit for what was coming. So they start from Suffolk in Southwold, where my family tree is based, and they travel to London, and then they find a boat, different boats between them, and they travel. They go down some fairly traditional routes that they don't go to. It's not a traditional pirate story going to the Caribbean. It's not a Pirates of the Caribbean story. They go a different way. The Pirates of the Caribbean, it's been done to death. Fantastic story, great characters, but I want to go somewhere else. So they go down the Horn of Africa. They go back up, and then they travel to India. They go across the Himalayas, and they come back the other end, go back down to Sri Lanka, Ceylon, Kandy, as it was known at those times, which you heard a little bit in the story there. And then they eventually might find their way to Thailand, and some of them find their way home.
Yeah. Don't give it away. There is something.
Nope, not giving it away.
No, don't give anything more. There is something in the back of your book. Let me just have a quick look at my notes. So, there are a couple of character names connected to your family names, which are mentioned at the back of the book. Let's tell the readers about that.
Right. So one of the things I struggled with, was character names, because they become part of you almost as a writer. Yeah. So, and family's really important to me, as I said earlier. So what I did, and I've done about 12 years ago, I did a lot of family tree research online. And what I did is I used some of those names, family names, in the book, going back to the 17th century to make sure that the names were real for that time, because a lot of names these days wouldn't be used then. So Riley Edwards, who's the lead character, well, my uncle is Riley Edward Bird, and he was the one that inspired me to go traveling, because he was on the he traveled for 20 odd years, merchant navy, mostly in the Pacific, plying the cruise line routes. So he was always going to be the lead, because he was the man that inspired me the most. The Weathersby Thacker and the brothers, the Thackers, are also part of my family tree going back many generations. And Weathersby Thacker, I just thought that's just such a brilliant name for this era. I just thought it's the name to use.
Yeah.
So I literally got open my family tree whenever I was looking for a new character name.
Yeah.
I'd go back to the family tree, go back to that 17th century era, and pick a new one.
Yeah.
Nothing. They weren't pirates. They're not. I mean, they were fishermen and farmers.
Yeah,
So
I thought that maybe you did have pirates in your family. Well, actually, I think you would do.
You probably have, but I haven't found them yet. I mean, but there were. But half the family were fishermen and half the family were farmers.
Yeah,
so
seafaring and land. Yeah,
the sea was a big part of the family. So again, there's a little bit of a connection there.
Yeah, sure.
But the names come from, most of the names, apart from the foreign names, come from the family tree.
Oh, that's wonderful to be able to use that. It really is. Okay,
we're
coming towards.
Also come from the family, but Pat's family.
Yeah.
My wife's family. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm sure our readers will really like to see those real connections with the historical fiction connections as well. We're coming towards the end, but I want to ask you a very big question. Since you have self-published, and of course, just to remind our readers that most of the authors who come on to Authors Chat and More are self-published, or sometimes it's called indie publishing. But since you self-published your first book about 18 months ago, you have helped many other writers, including myself. I'd like you to share what it is that you do to help other authors to be, and they could come to you as well. So please tell us what you have been doing since you first published your book. Quite briefly, Matthew, because we don't have masses of time.
No worries. So very briefly, I was asked by a number of authors to help them to get their book published after I published mine. And I'm the sort of person, I just like to help. And also, I really enjoyed the process of, once the book was finished, I really enjoyed the process of getting it published. So a number of people asked me for help. So I helped a couple of people get their books over the line. Some were part of my accountability group, others I knew anyway. And some more people asked, and some more people asked. And then I had a conversation with Michael Happel about the next masterclass for Write That Book. And we came up with a plan, and we called it the Platinum Package. And part of the Platinum Package was to typeset and to get the books published ready. So my process is, I now typeset other people's books, but I don't just typeset. I do a lot of work to actually take the manuscript and the covers and get them published ready. So the detail of getting it into systems to be able to print and to publish is quite technical. It's quite involved. It's detail, and not every author is going to be likes that type of detail. They'd rather spend the time on the book. So I've so far, I looked at the numbers this morning. 58 books I've now helped to get over the line, including mine and yours. Most of those I've typeset. Most of the covers I've worked, not all the work, but I've certainly helped it to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And out of those 58, there's about 160 variants. So there's paperbacks, hardbacks, ebooks, there's printing with a printer, there's hosting with Amazon. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And to be very honest, one thing I haven't been doing, and I really want to do more of it, is I want to write my second book.
Yeah, I was going to come to that.
I've started, but I haven't got the capacity in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm working on, at the moment, there's about 20 more books at various stages. Some at a very early stage, and some are just about ready to get printed.
Yeah.
And there's a lots of them. So I haven't got the capacity to do my own at the moment, but I'm next year may be different.
Yeah. And just one question is,
and I'm loving it.
How long does it take you to get a book typeset? with the cover, put everything together, and then upload it to Amazon if that's what the client is wanting you to do?
Think of a number and double it, and you're probably not going to be far off. It takes longer than anybody expects it to. If it was if I look at, oh, you can't see it. If I look at this one here,
oops, there it is.
Took about to typeset my book. I did it a second time. Yeah, I was practicing. Took about 4 hours of intense work just to typeset it. But the time to get it set up originally was hours. The cover, you can spend days working on covers, days and days. It just takes a long time. I've got time on my hands. Some take longer than others. I mean, a book just text, like a novel, is a simpler book to typeset than something with 250 photographs in it. Photographs and text is a bit more complicated. But yeah, it varies in time a lot, but none of the books are straightforward. And I'm still learning. I think every single book I work on, I'm still finding something new. And that for me is really important, because otherwise it get a little bit monotonous and a little bit like a routine. So I like the fact that it varies and it's interesting.
I want to just say to our listeners who will definitely come to Matt to have their book typeset, it's not just the typesetting, it's the many hours on Zoom that Matt is so generously prepared to give to us. I know I was getting a little bit upset at some points, and Matt was extremely patient. He has great knowledge. So I would say that if you want somebody whom you can trust and who will do a really good job of typesetting your book, Matthew will be the person to help you. He'll just give you his honest opinion, and he will be very patient with you, and he will lead you by the hand, and then he will clap you once it's done, because it's a great achievement for him and for the author as well. So I hope when you've written your book, you will think about Matt to typeset your book as well. So final question. How do you feel knowing that people around the world have read your book? What impact do you think it will have on them?
Well, fundamentally, the book is historical fiction. It's a yarn, okay? It's a bit of fun. It's not a serious book. I really strongly believe this is a holiday read.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a sit in the deck chair. Hopefully you can with a shade and just engross yourself for 12 or 15 hours, because that's probably how long it will take to read it. Just to engross yourself in a story that just makes you feel good at the end of it. It's not a serious book. I've tried to. I mean, there's sort of all sorts in the book, as you probably described already. It is a bit of a swashbuckler. But it's a bit of fun too. And there's some historical stuff in there, and you might learn a little bit too. But that wasn't the aim. The aim was to have to literally just engross yourself for a few hours, transport yourself to a different era, to a different place, and have a smile on your face at the end of it.
Thank you, Matt, for a wonderful chat. And where would-be readers find your book now?
You can, if you search online or on Amazon, if you search for Jackfruit Treasure or Jackfruit Treasure Trap, you will find me. It's handy having a unique name, a unique title for a book. It hasn't been used before. It comes up really quickly on Google. It comes up really quickly on Amazon. And I've got my own website, it's jackfruittreasure.com. So everything is Jackfruit Treasure, as far as I'm concerned. So if you see Jackfruit Treasure, that's me.
Yes. Thank you. I just got to tell you a little secret. I actually do not like jackfruit. I have eaten it and I don't like it. I know.
Not everybody does.
I must be the only
person. Everybody does.
But
it's a strong flavoured, strong smelling fruit. But it's not like its cousin that's called a durian. Durian. Smells and tastes like rotten onions. It's not that fruit. And some people get confused.
I think maybe I'm confused. Maybe it's the durian I don't like the smell of. Slimy. Very slimy.
It's powerful, it's strong, and it's part of the story. So yeah, and I've made jackfruit jam out of it. You can buy here jackfruit chips.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So, but it tends to be used as a dessert rather than anything.
Yeah. So Matthew, I think we're going to have another chat another time, coming off from the story about Thai food. And I'm sure you've become a good cook with that. So let's have another chat about something else relating to the Jackfruit Treasure. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you have enjoyed this interview with Matthew, and it'll be available on my Authors Chat and More YouTube channel tomorrow for all of you to listen to. If you've missed it or missed any part of it, you can catch up on my YouTube channel. Matthew, thank you once again. And thank you also for all the help that you gave me when I was having my book typeset and getting it onto Amazon, which for me is a complete nightmare. Anything to do Amazon for me, but Matthew really helped me through the process. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and look forward to chatting with you again.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Bye, everybody. And thank you once again. Over and out.